My family doesn't take normal vacations. We don't do cruises or beach resorts or stay in theme park hotels. No, we drive everywhere, pile everything into the back of our car like we're running away from civilization, and just go. Long roads, endless playlists, snacks that always somehow melt or crumble into dust. It's a tradition, one I never signed up for. So when my parents told me we were headed to visit my great-aunt Margaret, who lived deep in the rural Midwest, I knew I was in for another multi-hour, brain-melting journey of boredom and stiff legs. I didn't even know we had a great-aunt Margaret, but apparently she used to be close to my mom before some falling out decades ago. Now, suddenly they were talking again, and my mom said it was important we visit. Important always meant unavoidable. Margaret lived alone. Her husband had died years ago, and she never had kids. I was told she lived on some inherited property, a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere, according to my dad, but no one had visited her in over 10 years. That should have been the first red flag. The second red flag came halfway into the trip, when my mom mentioned casually that Aunt Margaret was once a professor. "What kind of professor?" I asked, trying to sound indifferent. "Oh, some obscure field. Folklore and cultural studies, I think," she replied. She was always into odd things. Odd things. Perfect. After nearly 12 hours on the road, we finally turned off the highway onto a dirt road, so narrow I was half sure it wasn't meant for cars. Trees formed a dense canopy overhead, filtering the late afternoon light into gold and green. Every now and then we passed broken fences, rusted signs, or a scarecrow leaning sideways in an empty field. Finally, the road opened up to a clearing. That's when I saw the house. I had expected something broken down and sad-looking. Instead, the house stood tall and clean, with white siding, dark shutters, and a stone chimney. It looked like it had been lifted straight out of an old photograph. Even stranger, it was huge. 3 stories. Wrap-around porch. The yard was meticulously trimmed, with topiaries shaped like animals, and a perfectly round flower bed in the center. My parents seemed just as surprised. "She must have done some work on the place," my mom mumbled as we got out of the car. The front door creaked open before we could knock. There she stood. "Margaret!" my mom called out, walking up the steps. Aunt Margaret smiled, her silver hair swept neatly into a bun, her posture straight as a ruler. She wore a deep burgundy blouse and black slacks, with a pendant around her neck in the shape of a spiral. Her eyes locked onto mine for a second too long. "You must be Jonah," she said, and her voice had the kind of clarity you don't expect from someone her age. "You've grown into a fine young man." Thanks," I replied. She gestured for us to come inside. The house smelled faintly of lavender and something else I couldn't place. The interior was pristine, antique furniture, polished wood floors, bookshelves in every room, but there was something sterile about it, like it was preserved rather than lived in. Dinner was polite. Aunt Margaret asked about school, my hobbies, what books I liked. She barely touched her food. My parents seemed relaxed, which made me feel even more uneasy. Everything was too perfect. That night, I couldn't sleep. The guest room had a massive 4-poster bed and lace curtains that fluttered even with the windows closed. I stared at the ceiling, the silence pressing in. Around midnight, I got up to find water. The kitchen was dark, but I noticed light under a door at the end of the hallway. I walked over. It wasn't a regular room, it was a study. Books were stacked to the ceiling, maps, diagrams, and pinned papers covered the walls. But what really caught my eye was the clock. A grandfather clock, at least 8 feet tall, standing against the back wall. Its pendulum was still, but the hands moved, slowly, too slowly, like time was being dragged forward. I stepped closer and noticed something strange. There were scratch marks on the floor in front of it, in a perfect arc, like the clock had been moved many times. I pressed my hand against the frame and it shifted slightly. I shouldn't have, but I did. I pushed the clock. Behind it, a hidden door. It was old and wooden, with a bronze handle that was cold to the touch. I turned it and the door opened with a groan. A staircase. Of course. I looked back. No one was up. The house was dead silent. I stepped inside. The stairs went down much further than they should have. The air grew colder. After a while, the walls stopped being wood and turned into stone. Finally, I reached the bottom. A long hallway stretched ahead, lit by hanging lanterns. I could hear something, soft humming, a woman's voice, gentle and melodic. I followed it. At the end of the hallway was another door, this one metal. I pressed my ear to it. Humming. Then, a whisper. Help me. My heart froze. I opened the door. The room was small. Cold concrete walls, a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling, and in the corner, someone sitting. It was a girl, around my age, thin, pale. Her wrists were bruised and her eyes widened when she saw me. "You're not her," she whispered. "No," I said. "Who are you? What is this?" "My name's Alice," she said. "She took me. I don't know how long I've been here." "Who?" I asked, even though I already knew. "The old woman, Margaret. She's not human." Footsteps. I turned and ran. Back up the hallway, back up the stairs. I didn't stop to put the clock back. I just ran to my room, shut the door, and stood there shaking. The next morning, everything felt normal. The sun was shining, birds were singing, Aunt Margaret was making pancakes. "You were up late," she said with a smile. My parents looked at me. "Did you sleep okay?" I lied, said I just stayed up reading. Aunt Margaret didn't stop smiling. That afternoon, I told my mom I wanted to go for a walk. Instead, I snuck back into the study. The clock hadn't moved. I opened the hidden door, crept down the stairs, and made my way back to Alice. She was still there, still scared. "We're getting out," I said. "How?" she asked. I didn't know. I just knew we had to try. That night, I waited until my parents were asleep. I packed what I could, crept downstairs, and helped Alice out of the room. She could barely walk. We took our time, careful not to make noise. We almost made it. As we crossed the living room, a voice said, "Jonah." Aunt Margaret stood at the top of the stairs, holding a candle. She didn't look angry, just sad. "She's not what you think," she said. "None of this is." "She's a prisoner," I shouted. "You kidnapped her." Aunt Margaret stepped forward slowly. "She's not human. She's a vessel, a door. Something lives inside her. I've kept it sealed all these years." Alice's hand tightened on mine. "She's lying," Alice whispered. She's the monster. I didn't know who to believe. Then Alice's eyes turned black, pitch black, like ink poured into them. I staggered back. What are you?" The girl smiled. "A door," she said. "That's the right word." She let go of my hand. The lights flickered. The air grew hot. The walls groaned. Aunt Margaret shouted, running toward me, but too late. Alice raised her hand. A sound came out, like screaming and thunder and metal tearing all at once. Then everything went dark. I woke up 3 days later in a hospital. They told me there was a gas leak that had caused hallucinations, that my aunt's house had exploded, burned down completely. They never found her body. My parents never spoke of it again. But sometimes at night I hear humming, soft and sweet, like a girl behind a door. And I know the real story didn't end in fire. It just began.